Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorthy, and today I'm very excited and honored to be interviewing a very special space champion, Mr. Swami Iyer. Mr. Iyer is the former President of Aerospace Systems for Virgin Galactic Holdings. He was responsible for leading the manufacturing, engineering, and program management teams, processes, and facilities to support the design and build of Virgin Galactic's current and future fleet of vehicles. Mr. Iyer has over 20 years of experience in commercial and highly classified aerospace, defense, and cyber industries. Previously, Mr. Iyer was also the president of Advanced Defense Systems for GKN Aerospace. Mr. Iyer is one of the leading aerospace industry leaders who is working to make the industry accessible to everyone, not just a select few. I'm very excited to learn about his insights and learn about his vision for the future of the industry, as well as dive into his aerospace journey. I reached out to Mr. Iyer on LinkedIn, and I'm really glad he was able to respond and take this time to do this interview today. And I'm very excited to dive into his story. So, welcome, Mr. Iyer. Thank you so much for taking your time to inspire the next generation of aerospace leaders.
Thank you, Gita. I'm very happy to be here.
Yeah, to just kick off our conversation, I wanted to first start off by asking about your typical day. I know usually there is never a typical day, but how does your day generally run and how do you like to structure it?
Typically I'll start my day by meeting with my staff on a typically daily morning call, or we'll have a set of meetings lined up, and everything from technical issues to business decisions, financial decisions to discussions about solving critical problems within the design of something, or working through the organizational structure and how to develop our teams. Those are typically on every single day. I have one of those conversations each, and then there are a couple of days a week where I typically be out of the field or looking at the vehicles or crawling around inside, talking to the folks on the shop floor.
Yeah, and with the space arena growing, with your background in commercialization in space, I wanted to ask you, with commercialization in space, so many private entities, startups, companies are coming into the aerospace industry, which is starting to grow and expand the job opportunities in the sector. So I'm curious to hear, how do you see in the next 10, 20 years the aerospace industry evolving and the dynamic between the government and government's role in the aerospace sector in relation to the commercial companies that are starting to open up now and starting to really rapidly grow.
I think I've said this a few times, but I think aerospace is going through another renaissance. The way that we did the 1930s with the early aviation, with the jets, and expanding the entire way we travel and kind of shrinking the world. I think space is doing the same thing, and overall aerospace is doing that. You're seeing a lot more financials coming, funding coming into the market from commercial sector. A lot of innovation happening very rapidly globally to do that. That's providing new technology into the space, and we're starting to see things like commercial travel to space. We're starting to see more access to payloads and scientific research at the even at the grassroots and private level, and we're starting to see a lot of people see the benefit, the return on investment from going into space. So I think that's going to continue. I think aviation will also continue for faster travel. We're starting to see a resurgence of supersonic and hypersonic type travel ideas hit the market. It's shrinking the world, and it's expanding the access for all of us to parts of space and airspace that we hadn't had before. And the industry is growing at a faster clip than it has in quite a while.
Yeah, and recently I went to the International Space Station's conference that was happening in DC, and I was looking at the vision of like Blue Origin's commercial space station that'll go up after the ISS, and just seeing all of the like the orbital reef and all of the other commercial space stations that we're planning to put up into space in the next 10, 15 years. It's mind blowing to think about the opportunities that'll grow with scientists having more opportunity to send their experiments to space, and even more individuals being able to go up and conduct experiments with more access. It's not just for a select few astronauts, but really the playing field is really opening up. So I think that makes commercialization very exciting. And I'm curious, like before this interview started, I know you were mentioning your interest or how you just really recently dipped your feet in like venture capitalist and how you are going into space economy and funding for space startups. And I think this is a very interesting topic because there are a lot of space startups that are opening up right now. So I wanted to kind of hear your insights on this. What are the technological gaps we need to still bridge in the industry? What are what space startups do we still need to create, or what are those gaps that we still need to bridge to continue advancing the space sector? Because a lot of startups are focused on different aspects of the industry, but I'm sure there are gaps we're still missing. So what do you think are like should be the next focus of the space startups to really continue pushing the industry forward?
Yeah, so where I'm focusing at is pretty much what we call the tier one supply base of space. So there's a lot of big guys making big things, all wonderful stuff, and then but they're all going to need a supply base, right? I'm working with about 8 or 9 different startups that I've either mentored over the years or invested in, and now I'm starting to see that they're beginning to produce a level of technology, and if you carefully select the groups at which with you work, right, and that they have good technology that's been proven and tested, but you're seeing things like more launch capability, even with everybody launching now, having regular ubiquitous launch capability for microgravity research or beyond is very useful. So working to see the startups that have some good novel launch solutions, propulsion companies looking for better rocket solutions, more reusable or more powerful and smaller packages. We're seeing additive manufacturing enter into space and some of the more difficult metals that are out there that we need to work with. We're also seeing companies that I work with that are looking at in-orbit manufacturing to take advantage of some of the benefits of being in zero G when you do additive manufacturing or you create infrastructure for manufacturing. There's satellite management in terms of debris management or in-flight or in-space refueling. Those are all kind of key aspects. And then there's a good software component. Several companies I'm talking to are looking at software for spectral imaging, so how to come up with better data off of what you see on the ground to make that useful and decision quality data, to debris management tracking software or orbital management or station keeping software for vehicles and things that are in space. So we're starting to see a nice breadth there of complementary services and capabilities and products. And that, no matter who wins the space race, if you were going to call it that, commercially, everybody's going to need materials, manufacturing, software. They're going to need these basic underlying things. So being a part of that ecosystem and growing and picking are kind of the clear winners because it then doesn't really matter which commercial system goes up or what space station goes up. They're all going to need that kind of base level. So I think you're going to see a lot more the same way that aviation started, except that if they could have pre-catered to or curated their supply base early on, it wouldn't be as fragmented as is now. So you can produce a much better, more cost-efficient result that
Yeah, and when you mentioned satellites, I found it interesting. I feel like there are so many satellite companies, and they're all doing almost the same thing. I remember I was listening to a few like virtual talks about like in the satellite 2023, and I feel like a lot of the companies were trying to tackle the same problem when it came to like trying to analyze different images or capturing different images of our Earth, communicating better from here to the rockets we send up. Like satellites kind of all have the same purpose. And I feel like there are a lot of satellite startups. Do you see a future in the satellite industry in particular? And do you think it'll change? Because right now I feel like a lot of the companies are doing the same thing as many others, and they haven't really been changing. So do you see the satellite area in specific changing or it changing its role in the next 10 years?
I see it coming up with different solutions for different problems. And the way I say that is there will be long endurance satellites. There'll be smaller, attritable satellites that are a bit more disposable and don't need as much station keeping. You'll see different management of constellations and software and the data that goes in them. And unlike in the past, you put a satellite up for decades, or whatever, 10 years, or whatever. The optics technology, the radar technology, things are getting faster and better and innovating a lot more quickly. So if you want to capitalize on kind of replenishing or refurbishing the technology base within a constellation, you're going to see people that service that. You'll see people doing software on that. You'll see a lot more high-end computing going into satellites, like AI at the edge. You'll see a lot of that going on. I think you're going to see significant growth in that, particularly. I think the name of the game with small sats are going to be able to develop systems quickly and effectively at a lower cost, or some of the higher end stuff, but there'll be what we call market segmentation, where that goes, different orbit levels, different satellite needs, and they'll all have kind of a wide range. It's, again, not very different from aircraft, where we had small planes to big jets to everything in between, right? So you'll see that kind of variation occur over the next 10, 20 years.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot more sense. And I can see that you're very knowledgeable about a wide range of topics when it comes to like the aviation, the aircrafts, the satellites, investments, the future of the space economy, and just things to look out for. And so I'm curious to learn a little bit more about your background and what really inspired you to come into this field in the first place. So my next question for you is, what was the aha moment that inspired you to come into the aerospace industry? Did you have like a teacher, a movie, a club, or some specific spark you had that motivated you to come into the space sector?
Well, my father worked in the industry. My grandfather was served in the Indian Air Force before, and I think I've always had aviation in the blood. So from a little age, like, I remember not wanting, fly or do whatever. So I did that my whole youth, and then I joined the Air Force. I became a test pilot. I flew for many years, and then I joined the aerospace industry because it's what I knew. I did a lot of electronics and cyber work as well. So that, if it's technical, if it makes a difference, if it changes things for the better, if it finds ways to either make things better for the warfighter, make things better for people in general, democratize space, or things are safer. That's always been fun for me. And having a guy, sitting in the cockpit, stuck to it, it's a little bit of a personal stint on it. But yeah, it's always been that way. I think what you're surrounded by those who mentor you, those who show you opportunity, and the things you become passionate about. And so it really depends on how you expose people, right, as they grow up.
Yeah, and it's really great to hear that you took your father and your grandfather as a role model and you're always excited about it, but then you also continued on that path as well. And I feel like there's a huge misconception that in undergrad or master's or whatever you do in your education, you need to have like an aerospace engineering background to really do anything in the space sector. And if you do it like an aerospace engineering degree, you can only build rockets or you can only do the engineering aspect of things and you can't really like branch out those skills into other jobs and other positions. And right now you're into the whole economy part of investing in space startups, which is not something you would think of an aerospace engineer or a mechanical engineer doing. And so I'm curious, how are you able to use your technical engineering background and kind of transfer those skills into more of a leadership position or doing things kind of direct, even if you're not doing the direct math of calculating something to send to space, how are you still applying those skills and tools to do other things and be in other positions and roles?
Yeah, so there's no such thing as a single-minded focus on anything. We educate young folks and in college engineers and things to learn more. As you start to see now, product development, whether it be space products or anything, requires you to understand the product itself. Otherwise, you don't really know if this
Right.
thing I'm going to make better is going to make us any money if we sell it, or if the thing I'm going to make better is going to be any safer if we do it, or be more easily usable and integrate into systems. So you got to know the product. It doesn't make any sense to get into business without really knowing it. But then you got to learn all the other stuff, right? And so there's no one field where you don't gain extra knowledge or bandwidth or growth. So, for example, if you're biomedical engineering or if you're working in the life sciences, some of that work is now beginning to translate into electronics design. We're seeing neuromorphic chips, and we're starting to see some things like that. We're starting to see life science experimentation, medical biopharma being made in space. So you can see a wide variety of things. And as more human beings go to space, so does the entire human life experience, right? So there's no, everyone going to space isn't going to be a space engineering nerd, pardon the French, but there are going to be people from all walks of life, from tourists to scientists to, who knows what's going to come next. And everybody who has that education base is going to be valuable in some respect in the new space economy or in aerospace. So you really can't ignore that. I mean, even when you fly on a space vehicle as a passenger, air quality, people getting sick, health, those things are all important. If you're flying in aviation, it's the same thing. How do you make sure passengers don't get sick, or how you manage things in the plane, or even the quality of the food that they eat changes when you change altitude. All these things come from different walks of life. I can't think of anybody in any field where there isn't going to be an applicability, because wherever humans are, everything that matters to a human has to be thought about. So
Yeah, that was perfectly said. I love to think of like space as its own little world. So everything, every career, every degree, every skill set you would need in the real world, you're going to just in the space industry itself, whether it comes to policy, communication, being a food scientist, really just anything. There's so many different careers you can bring into space as long as you're excited about the space sector. And
right.
in this journey so far, did you have any obstacles? And if so, how are you able to overcome them? A lot of times we can look at someone's accomplishments or their resume and be like, oh, they're everything was perfect for them. But I know like every journey is so different and it's not as perfect as we make it out to seem. So did you have obstacles in your journey? And if so, how were you able to overcome them?
Everybody does. I mean, everyone has their weaknesses. Everybody falls down and has to get back up. So, you know, Obstacles for me, getting in the Air Force was a lot of hard work. I had to get ready for that. It's a very much more physical fitness type things to it, so I had to work hard on that. To being able to handle, different types of people coming into different industries. You have to kind of, whether you're a woman or you're a minority or whatever, you have certain extra work you're going to have to do, just to be considered at the same level at sometimes. And so the challenge for diversity candidates is always there. But that means it's more hard work. It's more self introspection that you have to go do. But I always tell people we all got problems. We've all got our challenges. The difficulty isn't that you have them or that you're willing to get up again. The other thing you need is mentors, and you need partners, friends, people you can trust and loyal. Build a team within your own. But if you were a business, your own business has its own team that you would work with, whether it be partners, peers, friends, former subordinates, or people who work for you or bosses. But they all it takes a team to get you where you want to go. And I use this quote a lot: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Right. And so you have to build that. And I think that's your if you can accomplish that, then any challenge you face will always come with a helping hand, and you can always support each other. And that's the key, not just kind of buckling down and fighting some soul warrior, a single hero with a cape. So it's not the way it really works. Nobody succeeds up at any level without a tremendous number of people being a part of it. So
Yeah, and even having mentors, not only can you learn from what they've been through in their journey, but they can also provide you advice as well as guide you, or even not even as a mentor-mentee relationship, but just working together from the same position, building both of yourselves up, and working in a team, I think is so important. It's something that we tend to kind of forget because we're like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, but you forget to reflect and create and foster those meaningful relations and those connections, whether it be, virtually or in person conferences or even in your school. I think it can make a huge difference and go such a long way. So I know I definitely will take that advice to heart. And in your experience in the industry so far, you've had some really cool experiences working with various different companies. And so I'm sure you have some really cool insight for what to expect for the future, maybe. And so I'm curious to learn what excites you and what makes you the most nervous for the future of the space sector.
I think the thing that probably excites me the most is just the wide variety of what's come into space at this point. The amount of innovation. It feels. Wasn't a Silicon Valley person, but you start to see a lot of innovation with the internet. You start to see a lot with software, and we're starting to see, though it's much longer cycle and so the slower, a lot of innovation coming into space and a lot of excitement to fund it and grow it. So that makes me, very excited because when there's that much variety of problems to solve, there's never a boring day, right? And that's always fun. Nervous, I don't know that I'd be nervous, but I would say that, space at times from a economy perspective, when times are tough financially in the economy, funding dries up in space first because there are problems on the ground that people want to solve. But there are solutions that we develop in space that make things better, whether it be for climate change or it'll be for medicine or for human life improvement, whether it could be food too. But the point is that investment in space is not really an option. We need to do it. It's whether the pace speeds up or slows down. And sometimes, I had no boss tell me this, you have to have desert crossing stamina to make sure that when the bad times come, higher interest rates or whatever's going on, that you're staying the course. Otherwise, we don't progress. We're only going back to the moon now 50 years after we did it, right? So you can see how that kind of thing can occur. And so you hope to catch momentum and keep it going. So I worry a little bit, if things get tough, that momentum, wanes. And then that can be tough because it takes a lot of young folks that are dreaming to grow that way. But if you stick it out, if you pay attention to it, I think things will go well. Success and growth is a team sport, right? So
Definitely. And, the other day I also was hearing someone say how space is a long-term investment. So they've been saying that for like the past decades, where it's like you invest in space, you're in it for the long haul. And someone was saying that they said that like 50 years ago, and we're saying it again today. And it's like that long time will never come. So it's just funny how we view space as this long-term investment that never comes. And I think it's so important to be in the moment. And like you were saying, I think just continuously trying to push the space industry and continuously investing in it and getting, trying to show people, first of all, like even the government officials, like why space matters, why they should invest in space, and hopefully inspiring, the next generation and the talent to come into this growing industry and hopefully continuously, expanding where the space sector really goes and how it influences all of our daily lives is so critical. And what you were mentioning about what excites you as well, I definitely agree. Especially with AI, I think it just opens so many doors for how space exploration will evolve and how it'll change. But also in my mind, since I'm very interested in medicine, how telemedicine will change and how healthcare in deep space exploration missions, how AI will kind of change that, and maybe how we could bring all that technology back down to Earth to potentially make healthcare even more accessible for more folks to do like self-diagnosis at home without going to a hospital or just using AI for the better. And I think that technology is very exciting, and I can't wait to see within the next 20 years where that'll take us as a whole. And so my last and final question for you, now that we're able to learn about your insights as well as your journey, is what final piece of advice do you have for young students regarding their pursuit of a passion in space, STEM, really just any career, a piece of advice you wish you knew when you were a younger student? Like if you could go back in time, and give like 20 year younger self, advice, what would that advice look like and what would it be?
Um, I was kind of a nerd in school, so maybe a little bit different. But I would say this: for young people wanting to go to space, or really any sector, to be honest with you, a good, solid foundation in all of your subjects very, very important. People tend to focus overly on STEM and say get really good at science and math, and that's critical. If you want to do anything in the future, everything's code, everything is new tech and new science. But you can't ignore the other side of your education, your humanities, your art, things like that. You'll be surprised where your inspiration comes from. We designed a vehicle that basically was based on the badminton shuttlecock when it came down for a slower reentry. Or you'll see aircraft and vehicles being designed around birds, or new artistic ways to develop, vehicles and space and stuff that, and even using the human body as a map for looking at new electronics development. So there's really nothing you should ignore in your education. But I will say, find your passion with what you love in your academics, whatever that is, or as your education goes. There's always something you can do with it to the benefit of wherever you want to go. Space is open to everything, and you talked about space being a long-term investment. Humanity is the long-term investment, and space is just one of those critical things we have to invest in to make things better for us on the Earth and in the future. Which means all subjects are absolutely important. So, study hard at everything. I don't say you have to be perfect at everything, but every lesson you're taught will come to play one day, and so you'll need it. And I think, concentrating on where you want to get to, finding people who have gotten there before, asking them to help lift you up to get there, that's important. And then learn really carefully and thoughtfully about what it means to be a member of a team, what it means to be a member of getting something really big accomplished. It's never too early to learn that, whether you're in kindergarten or you're in graduate school. There are lots there that could make the difference between a successful solution to something or something completely groundbreaking. But it's not completely an individual effort. So I think you spend a lot of time thinking through that as a kid too.
Yeah, thank you so much for that advice. I think, those were really great points with first, STEM being the token of the space sector, but also realizing that there's a lot of other important skills that need to come into play that we should acknowledge and try hard, getting into our belt as well, I think is important, but also just realizing even if you are a non-STEM major, there are so many ways to enter the space sector and their talents and their interests are very much needed and required in the space sector, even though they're not the Albert Einstein physicists, there's so many other important, just as equal roles in the space sector that they're needed for. So I think that's a really great point, but also focusing on developing those mentorship relationships, finding that community that can uplift you and support you, and learning from your lessons is life lessons is so critical. So thank you so much, Mr. Iyer, for sharing your advice as well as your journey. I had a really fun time speaking with you, and I genuinely learned a lot. So thank you so much for your time today.
I enjoyed it. Thank you very much, Kitka.